Yeah.
Or they're getting together.
Should be by next week.
And she's been gone.
Yeah. That's why.
How long should we be out?
Next week. Yeah, that's 1 week. Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then we'll see kind of budget after this. Anything else? Sewer.
Whenever you're ready, Madam Chair.
I'd like to call the Public Service Committee meeting to order. I believe we have everyone here. And I would like a motion to approve the minutes from our previous meeting. I have a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none. Our first item to come before us today is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract. Oopsie. Let me go back for a moment. I'm okay. Yeah, but I wanted to make sure I didn't have anything on the old agenda. I didn't even look at that. I apologize. No, we're fine. Okay. Okay. I apologize. I didn't think we had anything on the old agenda, and we don't. So I'm going back to the ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract after publicly advertising for bids for the construction of the Hampton Ridge Sanitary Sewer, approving specifications, therefore, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Moore?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, this would allow us to replace a pump station. This would be a new sewer line that the folks in engineering figured out a different route. So we'll be able to eliminate a pump station, which has about a 30-year life. This pipe will have about a 75-year life. A new pump station would cost us a similar amount of money, except it would be the maintenance of it and the ongoing efforts to keep it going. This will eliminate the possibility of overflows, because if a pump station malfunctions, then you've got backups in people's basements and whatnot. So it's a project that is much better than what was originally proposed and will allow us to eliminate that pump station.
Mr. Moore, are the head of the association over there, are they aware of this?
They're most certainly aware. We've met with them. Metro Parks actually gave us the easement for this sewer line, which is good that they would cooperate with us and allow us to do this, because it saves a substantial amount of money. Over the life, we're estimating like $12 million, so it's a substantial savings.
Great. Okay, I will open it up for questions or comments from the committee. Hearing and seeing none, are there any members of council in the chambers that has a question or a comment? Okay, hearing and seeing none, what is the pleasure? Oh, excuse me,
I just
Mr.
want to add
Luttle.
one thing. To my left is Mike Teodecki, and Randy Kearns is out there. These two really put forth some effort to get this done. So we're eliminating this pump station, which means we're eliminating an asset. No more generator, odors, fossil fuels, all this reduction. And the homeowners there won't see anything anymore. We'll restore it. There'll be a manhole. So engineering does a great job all the time, but I really want to give them a lot of credit for this.
I want to thank you very much for doing a shout out to Mike Teodecki and Randy over there. No, you know what, those are the people behind the scenes that make these things happen, and you get the opportunity to present.
That's true.
You know, so I think it is really important. And just to reiterate what you said, Mr. Moore, this is a savings, but it was in cooperation with the Metro Parks. Also, it probably, I imagine it wouldn't have been able to be done. Would that be correct? Well, please speak up. You worked hard on this.
Yes, they cooperated well.
Okay, good. And this is a win-win for not just the city, but for our citizens also. So, I mean, not just for City Hall, but for our residents as well. So,
Absolutely.
great, good. Randy, do you have anything you want to add back there? Okay, great. Okay, and what is your pleasure?
Consent would be fine.
Okay, do I have a motion for consent? A motion and a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be placed on the consent agenda. And our second item that we have before us today is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into a contract after publicly advertising for bids for the construction of a replacement of the Zurich Road Pump Station, approving specifications therefore, and declaring an emergency.
I wish they could have figured out a way to replace this one, but we do need to replace the Zurich Road Pump Station. It's about a $2 million project. Consent agenda would be fine.
Any comments from, okay. I have no questions, and once again, this is in my ward, because I want to thank you because you keep me abreast of things that are happening. So I'm sitting here without any questions myself because of the great communication, so thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Any questions from members of council that are in the chambers? Hearing and seeing none, what is your pleasure?
Consent would be fine.
Okay. This item will be placed on the consent agenda. We're going to vote. Do you think we should vote on that one? What do you think? Okay, there's an motion for consent, and we have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, now to be placed on the consent agenda. One thing I should have asked while we were on this, there's a lot of development that's going on up on the Smith Road area that it isn't the city, we have Cuyahoga Falls doing it. What's the impact? Have we measured the impact of what we believe the new homes that are going to be happening up in that area will have?
Let me ask. That won't affect this pump station? That won't?
Not in the least? Okay.
No.
All right, because we have a nice development that's coming up there. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, now we'll go on to our next ordinance before us, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to file applications and enter into agreements with the Ohio EPA and Ohio Water Development Authority for a water pollution control loan to fund the construction of the Zurich Road Pump Station replacement project and declare an emergency. Mr.
Yes, this is for the Zurich Road Pump Station. It will allow us to get the loan funds we need to build it. We're going to ask for a 30-year loan. The interest rate will be determined at the time that we get the loan. Obviously, we'll try for the lowest interest rate we can possibly get. The loan's 30 years because that's the useful life of a pump station, so that will be amortized over the life of the station.
Mr. Moore, with the intention that we're going to get this loan, can we refinance this loan in a couple of years? Is that a possibility, or are we held?
We are getting such favorable rates that it may not be necessary, but yes, we could always refinance them.
Great. Okay. Any questions or concerns from the members of the committee? Seeing none, are there any questions from members of council that are in chambers? Seeing none, what is your...
Consent would be fine.
Consent. Do I have a motion for consent? I have a motion and a second, and I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be placed on the consent agenda. Okay, our next item to come before us is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to file applications and enter into agreements with the Ohio EPA and Ohio Water Development Authority for a 20-year water pollution control loan to fund the sanitary sewer reconstruction 2014 Phase 1 project and declaring an emergency.
Yes, this project, what we've done is we've lined a 54-inch brick sewer that runs underneath the Emerald Chemical Facility. The reasons we did that were obvious. If that sewer were to collapse, that would be a significant problem for us. So we decided at this point in time we'd add that to our 2014 sewer reconstruction program, and the cost came in at $2.1 million. Damn.
Any questions from members of the committee? No? Any questions from members of council that are in the chambers? Councilwoman Sims.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on on this particular project, is the total cost 2.1, and what is the cost over the 20 years?
Yeah, the total cost of this part of the project was 2.1. Do you know the 214 number?
The original loan amount was $5 million, so this $2 million is in addition to the original loan amount.
So the original loan is over the 20-year period too?
Correct.
What's the rate on the loan?
Do you know?
The loan will be awarded in January, so we'll know the interest rate at that time. The December loan interest rate is 2.62%.
Are we anticipating a higher rate on this portion of the loan?
A higher rate than the current December
On the
rate?
2.1?
I won't know what it is until January, but the December rate right now is 2.62.
So on the repayment plan over the 20 years, so what's our annual payment on this one with the additional?
I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't have that calculation in front of me.
Yeah, because we have several of these, it seems, and so it'd be nice to know what that cost is over the 20-year or the 30-year, and what our payments are annually on all of those.
We can
So
certainly
thank you.
provide that information.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing and hearing none, what is your pleasure?
Consent would be fine.
Okay, do I have a motion for consent? And I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We'll move on to our next piece, which is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to file applications and enter into agreements with the Ohio EPA and the Ohio Water Development Authority for a 30-year water pollution control loan to fund the sanitary sewer reconstruction 2016 project and declaring an emergency. Mr. Moore.
Yes, this is a supplement to our 2016 program. While we were doing the Aqueduct Street improvements, it was determined that this pipe that runs through the Mount Peace Cemetery, down the hill, and down, down to Hickory, thank you. It was in poor condition. We felt this was the proper time to get it lined because if there was an event, it would be quite catastrophic within the cemetery. So we lined the pipe. It cost us about $4.1 million to do that. This would be the loan to supplement the original loan and allow us to pay for this project.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Any questions from members of council? Councilwoman Amobian and then Councilwoman Sims.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. I think Aqueduct has turned out so well. I look at that little side area where the parking is on the street and everything. We had a house on that street, so I saw it. So it's really turned out very nicely.
Thank you very much.
Councilwoman Sims.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess my questions are still the same, similar. So now we have $4.1 million on top of, what's the original amount?
The original loan amount was about $5 million in this case again.
So is the total we're talking is $9 million, right?
Yes.
$9 million, Do we know what that rate is? And we don't know what our payments are annually?
No, I would have to get that information for you.
Okay. Last question. So is the 4.1 million just this addition that we need to do through the cemetery, and we didn't anticipate that?
Correct.
We didn't anticipate we would...
This was not a part of the aqueduct project, but while we were doing the aqueduct project, we televised this and found that there were significant problems with the sewer. And while we were out there and we had the contractor mobilized, we decided to line this pipe before something catastrophic happened.
So by realigning the pipe, you can avoid that?
We extended its useful life for another 50, 75 years, 50 to 75 years.
Okay. Thank you. I look forward to getting the numbers. Thank you.
And would you be so kind as to forward that to the committee also so that we have it? Thank you so much. Is there anything, what is your pleasure on that?
Consent would be fine.
And have we answered all questions? Okay. Do I have a motion for consent? Okay. I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none. Is there anything else to come before this committee? Okay, then we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Mike. Mike.
So, yeah, well, it will turned out a lot better than ours. At least you were 3 points away in the third period. How fast it gets started.
Mr. Kamer, just look at that heavy thing you got on your wrist. Gotta go. Yeah, just do curls. Ooh. Okay.
16.
We got Kamer.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move forward with the public safety meeting. To call it to order, please. All members are present. Can I get approval of the minutes of last week's meeting, please?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we have 3 new pieces in front of us. All right, with our first piece, authorizing the Director of Law to enter into a contract with the Summit County Public Defender Commission to provide legal services for indigent defendants in the Akron Municipal Court in accordance with the requirements of the Constitution of the United States with respect to the provision of legal representation to indigent defendants and declaring an emergency. And I believe, Sean Volman, you're going to speak on to this.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
Chair, members of the committee. As you know, you've all been here before. We have an annual contract with the Summit County Public Defender Commission to provide attorney services for indigent accused that are charged in the Akron Municipal Courts. We have Joe Kodish here who runs that office. He's more than happy to answer any questions about the program itself, but this would be to renew it for another year.
All right, thank you, Sean. Dollar amounts the same?
Actually, no. They're getting a $42,000 increase this year. However, that's sort of misleading because we do get reimbursed between 45 and 50% of the amount of the contract from the state. So usually, you know, of the $400-some thousand, we get about $200,000 back from the state. Okay. Part of that agreement to get that money is based on their, and Joe could probably put it better than I can, their agreement. They have an agreement with the state as well to provide services. Okay. And they have some staffing, some funding issues that are putting them salary-wise on the lower end of the spectrum. So we could risk losing our reimbursement. Okay. If that state funding gets pulled. So we're giving, it's a $42,000 this year, and for next year we'll probably be looking to do something similar. Okay. It's in it's general fund in the law department's budget.
Okay. All right, thanks for answering that. And then any questions, committee members? Direct them to Sean or Joe. Councilwoman Sims, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So last year, I know we talked a little bit about the number of indigent persons you're serving. How many did you serve last year?
Probably somewhere between 10, 11,000. That's not just Akron Municipal Court. It includes Barberton, Stowe, and Juvenile Court.
So specific to this contract, how many would you say you serve?
In Akron Municipal Court, we serve probably about 5,000 in that general area.
So on average, we're spending about $91.40.
It's going to go up a little bit now with this increase. It'll probably be about 110 or
$110 on...
In that general area. That's let me say, semi-educated guess.
So the $42,000 increase is for?
It'll be going towards salary increases.
I don't know, maybe it just sounds a little extremely low. I don't know how we're dispositioning cases.
Oh, you mean the per case?
The amount per case.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, we're getting a pretty good deal on this. It's been less than $100 a case.
So to give you some perspective on that, for those municipalities that we do not have contracts with, our per case is $170 per case. So because of the volume in Akron Municipal Court, it's less. And again, as Sean's indicated, the city's reimbursed, I think it's like 45% of that. And of course, we have the contract issue that he talked about. Every contract that we enter into has to be approved by the State Public Defender's Office, so it's a fairly lengthy process. And we have to comply with Chapter 120 of the Ohio Revised Code, which covers the Public Defender Act.
Can I continue, Mr. Chairman?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Councilwoman.
So when we are reimbursed the 45%, well, after 200,000, does that, when we are reimbursed the $200,000, does that go back to the?
No, it'll go back to the general fund.
To the general fund?
That's where it comes from.
The general fund of the law department or the general fund of the city?
General fund of the city.
So
we have
just out of curiosity, so why doesn't it return to the general fund of the law department to be used for next year's contract? How many years have we had this contract?
Well, I mean, we've had this contract for, I've been working on it for at least 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah. I mean, the fact is, our allocation is really $200-some thousand. I mean, that's what we're spending. The contract itself is for a higher amount, and we get reimbursed that amount. But, you know, the part that we have to spend is the lower number. We're counting on that reimbursement as part of the deal.
Thank you, Mr. Vogel.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other questions, committee members, comments? All right, we have, what's that mean? Okay. Oh, Councilwoman Omovian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious, are we competitive salary-wise
Are we competitive in what?
within the northeastern region, or I guess you compare yourself to the northeast, to the state? So how do we stack up?
I just can't
can't.
really give you an answer. I never analyzed it in that regard.
Okay. I mean, if someone,
I would suspect that we're going to be higher than some and lower than some, like in the Cleveland, Cuyahoga County area, they probably can do it for a little less. And you go into the rural areas and it's probably a little more.
would you have some information about the salaries and how we compare? If not, could you get that, please?
I can attempt to. I don't know the best way to, I mean, we can look at it.
I would think that the Bar Association could give you some direction, or somebody could.
Yeah, we
Thank you.
can find out.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Sims raised a good question. I wasn't aware that, you know, we budget for 400, we get back 200.
Again, I'm not part of the, I mean, I would
understand.
have to defer, but I mean, it's always been this way. We basically net spend a certain amount of money.
Okay. I just want to know, from our standpoint as a city, since that those dollars are pretty much reserved to service a certain population, when the money comes back, does it still target in some kind of way to service that indigent population in some kind of way? You know, we've got tent city, we've got all these other things that are going up with people. Or is that money spent? My question is, and this question we ask a lot, when that money comes back to us, how is it expensed? In the past, how has it been expensed? And you may not have that question.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not a budget
understand.
person.
like
But
Mr.
I think
Hardeman.
that might be a little, you know, form over substance type situation. I mean, in reality, we're spending $200-some thousand.
Yeah, I think we're just getting confused that somehow we're spending 400 and then we get 200,000 back. So we get a reimbursement. So there is no money coming back. It's just that there is a reimbursement from the state. So we end up spending about $200,000 that gets allocated from the general fund to the law department, which is the same fund. I mean, the law department's budget is the general fund and vice versa. And so there's no money coming back that then gets spent on other bills. It's just that the contract has a not to exceed amount, which is higher than what we expend because we get half that contract is paid for by the state.
I follow that part. So maybe this will help me better. Do we actually literally send them a check for 400 and then they say, okay, so it's just like we've done before, like, okay, so it's a cap amount. So now this is my next question. Since we've budgeted, and it usually comes, when it comes to us during the budget hearings, it's probably budgeted at that 400. Or is it budgeted at the 200?
That I don't know.
Okay, that's what I would like to know, because from our standpoint, if in fact we budgeted at 400 and it comes back, then we should allocate that money to serve that population in some other kind of way, so that we can track it. Making sense? Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, with that, do you have a hand up, down? All right, with that, what's your pleasure?
Consent would be fine.
Consent. Do I have a motion, a second, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, thanks, we'll put that on the consent agenda. All right, our next piece, ratifying the application for funding from the Ohio Attorney General's Law Enforcement Body Armor Program and authorizing the mayor to accept a grant from the Ohio Attorney General's Law Enforcement Body Armor Program to enable the Akron Police Department to procure life-saving body armor and declare an emergency. We have Sergeant Eric Wood, right? All right.
And of course, with me is Carol McCullough, who actually wrote the grant.
Carol, hello.
Hi there.
All right, I'll turn it over to you to tell us a little information here.
So the Ohio Attorney General gave us the opportunity to fund 25% of our cost of body armor, and we can apply to them, and they will fund 75% of the total for body armor for our patrol officers. This would outfit 56 individuals, so 56 vests. That includes plate carriers and plate inserts for the front and back, essentially to enhance the safety and prevent the injury of officers.
Okay, thanks. Anything you want to add before I ask questions?
Yeah, this is not your normal everyday body armor. This is hard plate armor. So what this is defends us against rifle rounds. It's more of an active shooter type of response kit that will be placed inside of the police cruisers for first responders to put on in order to go into a building to eliminate any type of threat. It's not your common everyday body armor that's worn underneath our uniforms on a regular basis.
All right, thanks. Thank you. Any questions, committee members? Councilwoman Sims?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is this primarily for the new devised task force?
No.
No, so it's just for every day. What's the average weight of one of the?
So it's pretty exciting. There's a new company out of Stowe called Shot Stop. You're talking about less than 10 pounds. Normally this body armor and previous technology would be almost 25 pounds. So the 10-pound limit makes it much more usable by all officers.
So we'll be purchasing from a single source?
Yeah, the grant's written for a combination of Shot Stop and First Spear, which is a company, I think, out of Missouri.
Thanks, Councilwoman. Councilman Swirsky?
I would just thank Ms. McCullough for the good work you're doing on this grant application, and it seems like we're improving our public safety forces all the time, and a lot of it is getting the right money, getting to the right sources for money, and I appreciate you, Ms. McCullough. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Swirsky. Appreciate it. Councilwoman Keith?
This is good to know that even though it's not Akron, it's kind of local, so that's kind of a nice feel there. If you could, what else would you have? What else are you looking at that would better be another tool that we would want our officers to have on these school duties?
I have quite the wish list, and if you'd like to know, I could
would
probably...
just like to know, I would like, how about your top one? I think this is wonderful, and I think this is good, but it sounds like foundational. So, I'm sorry they haven't had it before this, but I'm glad we're getting it now. So, could you just give me an idea of something else?
So I have my own list, but it's very self-serving that way because of the units that I'm involved with. So to tell you what the hierarchy is in the department is, I don't think I'm in a place to speak on that. Okay. So each area has their own most needed piece of equipment. Our crime scene unit has a most needed piece of equipment. Our patrols has their most needed. Our detectives, our violent crime task force, our special units as far as our SWAT team, we have our own most needed type of item also. So it's hard for me to say which one has the highest priority department-wide. Okay. But I could give you a couple.
No, I think that's fair, but I think the fact is this is so foundational that we are just, we're not there yet. That's for doggone sure. So I just think I think that should be brought out, that our safety forces, that our first responders, whatever they are, we need to have them as well prepared as possible. And I appreciate the fact that this was even done, but there's no doubt in my mind, I'm looking at the picture going, there's a lot more yet to come. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Kilby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Officer, how much does this break down, this $56,000 for each set of body armor?
So it's not 56, it's only 39. It's about $40,000. It's 56 vests over the 40,000, so it's less than $1,000 per unit.
Okay, good. So this is a special, you say plates are put in the front and the back if there's an emergency situation, or?
Correct. This would be considered hard plate armor, which is not the soft body armor that we normally wear.
Is it metal, steel?
Pardon?
Is it steel plates?
It is not. It's like a carbon fiber material, which is what reduces the weight.
Yeah.
And it also comes with a 10-year warranty on that armor, which is way better than the old stuff.
So once you have the plates in there, I mean, you don't have to wear the plates unless you insert them, right? Is that what they're saying?
Correct. Our requirement for body armor for an actual patrol officer is just soft body armor, which does not stop any type of large
So how big
caliber.
are these plates? Can you give me an idea? Just
They cover most of your vital organs, so they're cut like a shooter's cut style, which is down
okay. So they would stop a high-powered rifle
up to a
shot?
7.62, which is an AK-47.
So, like, if you got hit with a high-powered rifle, would that knock an officer over? I mean, it would still probably knock him off his feet, wouldn't it?
You would probably break a rib.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'm glad we got this kind of equipment in this day and age especially, so. We haven't had this before?
It was reserved only for our tactical units.
Okay. So they're going to be carrying these in their cars in case they need them, right?
Yes, so 2 vests, the 56 number is because they put 2 vests in every patrol car and 1 in each supervisor's vehicle.
All right, well, thank you.
Thanks, Councilman. Any other questions or comments? All right, with that, what's your pleasure on this? Consent, suspension of the rules?
Consent will be fine.
Consent, okay.
Motion for consent?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, we'll put that on the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Thanks. Are you two here for the next piece too? Just you? Okay. Thanks, Sergeant. I appreciate it. Our next and final piece, ordinance ratifying the application for funding from COPS Office School Violence Prevention Program, other known as SVPP, administered by the U.S. Department of Justice, and authorizing the mayor or his designee to accept the funding from the SVPP to purchase safety equipment identified as needed for Akron Public Schools and resource officers that serve them and declare an emergency. Go ahead, I'll turn it back over to you and introduce your guests that you have with us, please.
Thank you. This is Dan Rambler from Akron Public Schools. I don't know your official title right now, but it's Head of Security and something else.
Yes, I'm sorry, it's Dan Rambler, Director, Student Support Services and Security.
All right, thank you.
So we met with APS as well as the school resource officers to discuss the needs that we have in Akron Public Schools, and came up with our wish list and sent it to the COPS office, and they funded the equipment that we requested. So that'll include new laptops for all of our school resource officers, projectors for each of the schools, so that that will be specifically for the use of the SROs to do presentations related to safety and any other sort of presentations they might have. Digital cameras, because they don't actually wear their body cameras within the schools. It's an agreement we have with APS. So this would allow them to take pictures of evidence and that sort of thing as needed. Metal detectors, these would both go for schools that do not have them currently, and these are the walk-through type, as well as to replace older equipment. And heavy breaching kits to aid in rescue attempts that involve barricades. So the total that we would be getting from the COPS office is $113,775. There's a 25% match, which will be split evenly between Akron Public Schools and Akron Police Department.
All right, thank you. Sounds good. Very interesting. Any questions from council members, committee members first? Councilwoman Keith, please.
With the I didn't hear the last thing after the metal detectors. What was the very last thing you
Heavy breaching kits.
Heavy what?
Breaching, so to breach a doorway that's been barricaded, for example.
Okay, all righty. Thank you. With the metal detectors, will that now mean that all schools, all high schools will have walk-through metal detectors?
Yes, currently all high schools and middle schools do have walk-through metal detectors that originally started in the late 1980s. So there's a number that we've been replacing, a number that we still want to replace, but as our high schools have reduced and then our numbers increase at our remaining high schools, we want to not just have one at all of the buildings, but then have two.
Are these used daily?
They're used randomly. which is commonly at least once every 2 weeks, but some buildings use them more often than that as well.
And Dan, when they're used randomly, are they used at specific times of the day, or is this at entry when all students are coming in?
We randomize that too. We try to make it so kids and community members really don't know when we're going to do it, because we want people to anticipate it could be at any point.
So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Good questions. Any other questions, comments from committee members? Councilwoman Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm always concerned about creating environments that look like miniature prisons. So I did not see in the legislation it delineated and what we're purchasing. Is there a supplement to this? Here's.
You know what, it's in the request for legislation, but not in the Uniform City Council report, so I can repeat this with you.
Yeah, so it's hard to see what exactly we were purchasing. So in one of the, in the purpose of legislation, there's a part that says target hardening measures. What exactly is that?
That's simply referencing what the COPS office said was eligible. So it's making it so that a location is less likely to be under threat or more prepared for a threat. Target hardening basically means that your target is better prepared. Does that make sense? I'm not very good at that. You might be better at that.
Yeah, I think I could try to help. So there's very common concerns that happen in every school shooting. There's common areas that police officers and school officials look at that if you impact this, it's less likely to occur. One of the things is everybody gets interested in metal detectors and police in the schools, and that's good. But there's a lot of prevention work that needs to be done, because I agree with you, Ms. Sims, that we never want our schools to feel like prison. And we don't do the metal detectors all the time, all day, every day. And we get pushback from that, but we also do a lot of prevention work. It's one of the reasons in the grant we purposely put in computers and laptops for the SROs, because they do prevention training with the kids, which is really, really impactful for kids. So they do bullying prevention, they do sexting prevention, they do guns, knives, and dangerous weapons prevention training. So that way we're not just reactionary and after the fact, but we're trying to do prevention work so that way we can stop something before it happens. Another quality that the SROs, and we're fortunate to have an agreement with the city, is that we're able to select those officers together, and the schools are able to pick the officers, is that we have a lot of officers that build phenomenal relationships with kids. And I say this all the time, that every year we find about 3 guns in our schools. Historically, in my 6 years, those have never been in some tragic way found. They've always been found preventatively, and at least 75% of those guns every single year are found with the SRO being able to handle it in a very calm and peaceful manner, which goes to a lot of the work that everybody's doing on the prevention side of it. It's not to ever say that something else can't happen, but it's why we work really hard, and plus part of this grant is to do the prevention, so that way you're a much less likely target. You're not going to eliminate being a target, but you're a less likely target.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I always can appreciate your sensitivity towards that. So I really think that it's very thoughtful and appropriate that we are thinking about along the preventive measures. I know that what we've learned from young people, that often just seeing constantly the metal detectors create this sense of anxiety that we're trying to kind of interrupt. And I think that happens when we're doing this kind of mediation or intervention to work with them to build relationships. So I look forward to seeing the list, and it sounds like we still continue to do really good work as partners. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And Mr. Keith, I don't know if somebody in the back can come out, maybe get a copy of that from Carol and make copies for all of us real quick before she takes off today. Appreciate that. And then also, before I take another question, I just hopefully make a request to the administration or you two folks. In the future, if we have any kind of similar legislation that comes through in regards to school resource officers, it'd be nice to have one of those representatives come to also to present and answer any questions. I don't know who the head SRO officer is now. Is it still Sergeant Doug Sandor? Okay. I would really like to see someone that is hands-on in the schools. No offense. I just want to see one of them here so they can answer questions and give us some insight. So, Councilman Swirsky.
Yeah, I applaud your work again. I'm glad that, and I think a lot of parents would be glad that there's a partnership with the Akron schools and the police department. And I want to point out that the benefits probably would be, if you're working on prevention, the benefits won't be solely in the space where the students are in the schools, but they'll also benefit us by preventing youth violence in our community. So appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions or comments? Councilwoman Omobian?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate your sensitivity to this. It comes across, and I know it's a problem that we are even here, but we know that we are with all the things that are happening in schools. Do you do a routine like drill like they do for fire and those other kinds of things? And how often do you do that?
Yeah, and what we would call that is our safety drills or ALICE drills, which ALICE is our active shooter training response. So the school resource officers, the police officers in the schools do all of our ALICE training with kids and the staff throughout every building. We then do 4 trainings throughout the year, and those trainings, they adjust as the year goes on because they change the scenario, because there's a lot of different things that could happen. So we try to get people to think about what they would do and not just have a rote response. But it's challenging. And the other thing I would just like to say is that we're very fortunate that we have the police officers in the schools we have. It interact with them because they're not what people think just of a police officer. They play a multifaceted role with our kids and our families, and they're seen as really a school resource officer, not just a police officer in the school, which is different. And we are so beyond where other cities and school districts are in that program, and I think that's something that all of you in the city should be incredibly proud that we have that kind of partnership to be able to do that as well. But we do 4 per year, to go back to your point.
Yeah, sure, Councilwoman.
I really can appreciate that comment because we use police officers at my place of work, and it's amazing what the uniform and all of that speaks to when the folks come in. But not only that, the interaction they have with our clients, it prevents a lot of things from happening. So you're right on point with that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. With that, I just want to, Councilwoman Sims.
Just a last and final question. So where do we have the metal detectors in our elementary schools?
No, we don't have them in the elementary schools.
Excellent. So I'm hoping that kind of preventative stuff we're talking is working. So currently, we have 16 schools that we're looking at approximately that will be getting, and those are middle school and high schools.
Yes, for us, middle schools, high schools, and alternative programs are the only schools that have the walk-through metal detectors.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Councilman Kilby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Got this list, and, you know, we always talk about saving money or trying to save money. I just got a question, like these laptop computers are like $1,900 a piece? I mean, what kind are they? I mean, 'cause
It's not just the computer, it's also peripherals, so everything that they would need, like
What do you mean peripherals? What are those?
mouse, card, the card that allows them to use it off-site, those
okay.
types of things.
So, I just was questioning that because I don't know that much. I just bought my daughter one at Walmart. The best computer laptop they had was only $750, So,
Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, if I can, just because I know Sergeant Sandor and I've talked a lot about this. It's a unique thing with the police officers and the computers they need for their system to run. I don't know what it's called. It's got some term, so they can look up the criminal things they have to look through the city.
okay.
It doesn't perfectly match with the school district's network and what we have to have, so there's, instead of Walmart, Staples options, our options are much more narrow, and it's one of the reasons we looked at the Apple ones, because it actually plays a dual role in that. But I appreciate your point. It's been a challenge over the years for us because they need very specific computers for both the police and then for the school, and that's where they're playing that dual role for us.
So who's supplying them? Who's the source that we get these from?
One moment. Lieutenant Farrar is in the audience. I'm going to ask him to come up here. He's actually in charge of procuring these things.
You guys, is it just one source, or is there more than one source that can supply the same equipment?
Just hang on, yeah. So most of the computers that we've been buying recently for the city, including the MDBs and the police cruisers, have been a Lenovo product, okay? And those are right around $1,300, give or take, but then you got the USB-C, which is the dock that plugs it into the wall. You have the NetMotion to get it on the city internet. You got the mouse, you got all these other things. So those specs aren't set in stone, and we might not even purchase those because they might not need that much of a computer for honestly what they're doing, because as Mr. Rambler stated, it's very difficult. If we put a SIM card in one of these Lenovo's, it's very difficult to get the signal within that school building that deep. So they may actually have to continue to get their emails on whatever computer that APS currently provides.
Okay, so who makes the decision which company we buy them from? I know we're authorizing $32,300 for 19.
Bruce, can you talk into this microphone, please?
Who makes the decision who to go with?
Well,
Is that your job?
Yeah, I mean, part of my job is to come up with specs for the equipment to purchase, but during the course of that vetting process, we would get with Sergeant Sandor, we would get with our IT guys, and we would certainly get with the folks at APS to come up with that as a collaboration to determine which particular laptop would be appropriate for the things that they need to do with it.
Well, I understand that. I'm trying to find out, is it only one company you deal with, or is there more than one company you put these specs out? I mean, usually you get a better deal if you shop around.
Right. Well, the city has an agreement with Lenovo, so that was just used as a general price point to start with. Those numbers may change, sir.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions or comments? I don't think Walmart sells metal detectors, though. But with that, Councilwoman.
Just on the heavy breaching kit, I was at a training recently between the fire department and the police department, and they had tourniquets. I guess that's kind of something new we're looking at. Is that a part of the kit?
Tourniquets are not part of this, no.
Okay, so the aid to rescue and attempt is just for barricades?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Before I call for a vote, is consent agenda okay on this?
Yes, it is.
All right, thanks, Carol. And Clerk, Councilwoman Keith wants her name added, please.
Okay.
And with that, can I get a motion for consent agenda?
Motion for consent.
I have a motion from Councilwoman Swirsky and a second from Councilwoman Keith. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, with that, we'll put that on consent agenda. Sorry, I put candy in my mouth, and we're adjourned. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the next committee is Economic Development. Okay.
Economic Development will begin in about 1 minute. So, Mr. Chair, are these working on the bill?
Yes, they are. Can I help you? Yeah. Okay, I'll check with Sarah and them. I don't know if we can pull it up right away.
I got a minute. We're going to go ahead and begin Economic Development Committee. We'll forego the approval of the last meeting's minute until the close of this committee meeting. We have two items today. Item 21 that's before us, authorizing, offered by Ms. Samples, authorizing the mayor to enter into a grant agreement with Beyond Expectation Barber College LLC in the amount of $32,500 for student retention, new student enrollment, and other student-related expenses, and declaring an emergency. Just to advise the committee, the author of the piece of legislation has asked for time on this piece, but I think that it gives us a real good opportunity to have at least some initial discussion. I'll defer to my colleague, Councilwoman Samples.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Madam Chair stated, this ordinance is to authorize the mayor to enter a grant agreement with Beyond Expectations Barber College. With us this afternoon, we have Mr. Garrett, who is the owner and founder of Beyond Expectations Barber College, and I want to yield to him to give him an opportunity to talk to us about the many successes over the years from BEBC. And there's a handout that's being passed to all the committee and council members that you can refer to. And with that, Mr. Garrett.
Thank you, Councilwoman Samples. Mr. Garrett, if you wouldn't mind coming to the podium.
Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to Economic Development Committee. We're also always grateful to have great folks who are doing great work in the community to come before us. So As you will.
Thank you for having me. Council, I appreciate the time. Thank you for allowing me to come in to speak on behalf of some of the students we have up at the Barber College. Recently, every year for the last 5 years, we've been having what's called the Barber Battle. And this opportunity gives folks who've been cutting hair in their basements illegally, passing germ diseases, infecting our community, and who actually have the skills, the opportunity to come up and compete for a free scholarship. Well, we just had one November the 11th, and we gave away 2 scholarships for individuals to start school. And it was a couple students at that point in time said, hey, well, we didn't win, but we would like to get some help and assistance attending school as well because it's a little bit challenging. And so I thought, well, let me take a look at maybe some opportunities for us to maybe try to find some type of funding to be able to assist. Currently, it is $10,500 to attend Beyond Expectations Barber College. A lot of folks, my goal when I opened the school is to have these guys walk away debt-free, not to have debt, to be able to get a second chance at life at this whole entrepreneurial piece. And during that process, we've graduated 66 students. We have a 100% success rate at the State Barber Board. We have an 87% job placement rate. These folks are finding jobs. We've opened up 12 barbershops in Summit County area. From that, we've employed 44 of those folks right here, 40 of those folks right here in this area. So people are working, they're getting jobs. Not only when they graduate from the school, these individuals open up those shops. But now all of a sudden, they no longer have to get back in that unemployment line. They can make money for themselves and their families. And for these shop owners, now they've opened an opportunity for 4 other people to come and work in that shop and make money. This is a great opportunity to partner. I think I've demonstrated the ability to put it all together. Starting out as a young entrepreneur, I made mistakes, but since then, I've taken a look at trying to run 2 businesses, trying to get things together, solicited the help of Coming Together Accounting. They help with all my books. I've also have OFG Advisors with Renee Baylor, my accountant. And I also have a CPA firm, Hemfield and Associates, who've given me 2 years of good audit. So I'm in position. I'm ready for the city of Akron, and these guys are looking for that opportunity. So anything you can do to help, I'm interested in meeting or matching half. So if you take a look at the document that I passed out, it's Akron and BBC, it's our program plan. I would like to, Beyond Expectations Barber College is a professional barber college that is committed to maintaining its standards of excellence. Beyond Expectations Barber College provides its students with training, educational experience, and tools necessary to prepare them for success and a fulfilling career. I'm asking, the students would have been here, but we scheduled them for 7 o'clock. So they're interested in coming in and telling their stories and their backgrounds, and if you allow. So I figured 6 students for some assistance right here in the city of Akron. The program goal to complete the 1,800 hours as prescribed by the Barber Board and earn their license. The objective, there's 23 different chapters in the textbook that the students would have to go through, and that's from My Lady textbook. That's the industry standard. And then they'll have to go down to the State Barber Board and complete what's called the medium sideburn taper haircut and pass the written exam. All of our 66 students have passed that exam. The master instructor, Mr. Daniel Williams, who was a recipient from the House of the Lord, a scholarship, and now has gone through becoming a barber, and now is becoming a master instructor, and now is a director of Beyond Expectations Barber College, and he's also a part business owner of a barbershop that we have in Mr. Schwarsky's ward called College Cuts. So these guys are coming out. They have aspirations of being great, and I think with this partnership that allow them to do that. The responsible staff, we're all certified backgrounds. These guys are passed their tests. The scheduled time frame are Tuesday. It's an 1,800-hour course, 10 and a half months. The time frame is Tuesday through Saturday from 8:45 to 5:15, and they complete the 1,800-hour course. Some of the measurements we use are weekly review sheets and workbooks, weekly quiz and tests, monthly progress reports, and those progress reports cover the most 3 recent chapters. It is more than cutting hair at Beyond Expectations Barber College. It's a way of life. It is changing folks' lives. It was less than 5 years ago I started this opportunity. And it's just a true humbling and blessing experience when these guys graduate to really look them in the face and say, I'm the lucky one, I'm the blessed one, to watch you grow, to walk in here, to not even be able to hold a pair of clippers. And now you have clients knocking down your door. You're in the process of opening up your own barbershop. This is just a cool thing to be a part of, and I'm so blessed and humbled. There's pictures of some of the barbershops that we've opened. Just to go down a quick list here, Levels Barbershops on King James Way was opened up in 2016. They have 3 employed barbers. College Cuts on Akron U's campus has 5 barbers employed there. Visions Barbershop on the east side of Akron has 3 barbers employed there and 2 cosmetologists there. Kangaroo Cuts is on Highland Square, and he has 2 barbers there. Hall of Fame Barbershop is in Kenmore, and that opened up in 2017, and they have 4 barbers there. Live Barbershop on South Akron, he has 2 barbers there. Legends Barbershop 1 on West Akron, opened up in 2014. That was the very first barbershop that we put together there. And the reason that it's called Legends is because of all the barbers that came before, Mr. Hodges, Mr. Lee, Mr. Hodges, Miss Roberta Nelson, who helped us open the school. This is just my way of telling those folks that they're a legend to us, and the reason that we're able to do what we do is because of them. And Legends Barbershop has 4 barbers. Legends 2 on the east side of Akron has 5 barbers, and Legends 3 in Goodyear Heights has 4 barbers. This is in 5 years. This is in 5 years we're changing lives. I appreciate the time to even speak about it. It is truly humbling, I tell you. But I can answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett.
Thank you.
Is there any questions from the committee? Mr. Kamer.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I don't know if the administration is going to speak to this too, or if just the sponsor has all the details. I'm looking for more details.
So, Mr. Kamer, I know we, at the start of the meeting, we talked about that we're just introducing the piece to take some time.
Save all my questions for next time?
No. If you have questions, you certainly can ask those. Okay. But if the administration wants to interject something, they're certainly welcome to do that. Okay. But I had no knowledge that they wanted to do that, but certainly they are welcome to do that. But if you have some questions that you'd like to address here, you're more than welcome to do that.
I would like to hear from the administration, please.
Sure. Is that okay, Madam Chair?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Hardy.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, we've had, Mr. Garrett and I have actually exchanged voicemails today, so we'll connect after the meeting. But obviously, as Mr. Garrett said, the request for support of Beyond Expectations is nothing new to this council. He's been very forthcoming with us thus far in terms of the challenges that we had last time. He's submitted 2 clean audits to the city thus far. Our voicemails are to sit down and meet, primarily because if you look at the list of businesses that have been opened up as a result of the graduates from the program, many of them are opening in the Great Streets districts. And getting more business activity into our neighborhood business districts is a key focus of the mayor, obviously. And so what we want to do is sit down with Mr. Garrett, explore opportunities through the Great Streets Initiative to see if there could be some support that may make this legislation not needed if we can work something out that way. So we very much want to sit down and work through those details, put together an agreement that we could bring back to council to certainly share with you. Those Great Streets dollars have been allocated already, but we would certainly be forthcoming with council in terms of anything that we would hammer out. But the administration is wanting to sit down with Mr. Garrett and talk frankly about how we can, how we might be able to support it through the Great Streets program.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Is any other questions from the committee? ahead, Mr.
Councilwoman, I'm
Kamer.
not finished yet. Thanks. My other question might be for Mr. Garrett or the administration. I noticed you mentioned Summit County a few times. I see it here on your paper in regards to all the locations. Have we tried to reach out to Summit County in a collaboration to try to raise some funds or to try to get you some money?
I've reached out. There's a WIA program, and we're trying to work through that WIA program with the state funding as well. Once the school is accredited nationally, then they will kick in as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Kamer. So, again, I certainly appreciate, I've had the privilege to know the work over the years. I know that you've even made scholarships available to our students in Akron Public Schools who are graduating. You know, recently we had a report from Elevate Akron to look at the exclusion of African Americans as it relates to economic development in our community. To see an organization like yours who is intentional about identifying young folks, particularly African Americans, that are looking for second chance opportunities to be able to do this work, I think is ideal for someone we need to be partnering with. So I appreciate the piece coming before us, and I'm hopeful that we're all thinking along those same lines and working together to figure out how we can partner with a group or organization that's doing this kind of work. So if there's not any other questions from the committee, is there any questions from?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to yield to Councilman Neal because he's had his hand up, and then I'll come back around.
Councilman Neal.
Thank you, Ms. Samples. Thank you, Ms. Sims. I just wanted to stand. I mean, as Mr. Hardy's mentioned, Mr. Garrett's been here before, and I mean, I knew what you do, but 37 jobs, I don't know how many between these different businesses, that's commendable. I appreciate you being focused and sticking to the task. But I just want to say, you know, a lot of times we have businesses that come into our community and they provide a product and then they go. But Mr. Garrett, I think I can speak, and I think almost everybody's community ward has been touched by the service that your company gives back to the community. And in this day and time when our young men are seeking direction, seeking some type of guidance, if anybody knows anything about a barbershop, a whole lot of wisdom is passed in those chairs in a barbershop. And I feel comfortable that where these establishments are, our young men are getting some, not only a good cut, but some wise wisdom on how to walk and direct their life. So I appreciate you, and thank you for bringing this before us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Councilman Milkovich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too want to have a comment. I want to thank Mr. Garrett. He has been truly an asset to this city for providing a entrepreneurship path and also a career path for a lot of the students. And like we all said, it's touched every part of the city. I want to thank you, Ms. Garrett. Thank you so much for the hard work.
Just a minor disclaimer, when he says the guys, he means the girls too, because we know we've had many of those in the shop as well. Councilwoman Samples.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to relay to my colleagues that if you have any questions prior to us going into next week, is next week our last meeting? Or the week after? If we could get anything in question-wise prior to that, I and the Chair would definitely appreciate that. I just want to close by saying that, you know, I appreciate what Mr. Garrett is doing with these young people up there. I visit the shop quite often, and the reason for the legislation was sitting and talking to the students. Mr. Garrett has a really cool thing that he does at his shop called Who's in the Chair, and he invites elected officials up, and they sit and they talk with the students about, you know, things that affect them in life, and then they educate them on the process of being part of this community, and not just being barber students. He teaches them local government, which I think is very, very phenomenal. And each and every year, they do a big GOTV push all these young men are involved in the process. They're not just, as we call, returning citizens. They are involved in the process that involves the city and moving our city forward. And I commend Mr. Garrett and his staff for that, because he could be anywhere else doing anything in this world. He's a veteran, educated man who could be doing everything, and he decided to sow back into the city. So I thank you for that, and I'm hoping that you all can get your questions in so we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Samples. Councilwoman Mobian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I, too, appreciate all the comments that have been made. I think I've been to several of your shops myself and used the services. And what I appreciate more than anything is how well run and managed they are. And they are all over. I've been to the one on Mill Street, the one on Exchange, the one on Romick Road, and the one in Barberton, which is in that very nice development. I think, and I appreciate the comment, Mr. Hardy. What I'd like for us to look at and think in terms of, as we think about TIFs for businesses and all the businesses that we endorse and help, if we could think of something that's comparable to that for small businesses, particularly those that are run by minorities, how do we help them in order to, he's had the business in place, but this is to help sustain his business and take it to the next level. He came to us several years ago, and we brought the legislation to the table, and at that time it was turned down. But if we start thinking about the same TIFs that we use for all of these businesses that we've endorsed in terms of helping them with the land and whatever tax deferments, and think of that in terms of how do we use resources to help, and I don't know, that would be community development block grant dollars. I'm sure those are maneuver dollars that are malleable, but I understand there are some limitations. But I'd like to talk with you after this to see if there are some other opportunities to help, because you know, Mr. Garrett has been doing a great work for some time now, and to think in terms of going to Columbus and 100% of your students are passing the test and coming back and generating jobs and paying taxes and becoming good citizens, because a lot of them are involved in the political process, as I know, and I've seen them. So you're trying to help them change and mold their lives in a different way, and getting a job is always the first step to doing that, and keep that recidivism and all of that down. So I really appreciate that. So I certainly like to talk to Mr. Hardy a little bit more about some ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Mobian. Mr. Swirsky?
Yeah, I'm just going to commend Mr. Garrett. You're doing the right thing at the right place, and now is the right time. I'm going to support this.
Thank you.
It was your words last time. You looked me in the face and offered EDCI, and you told me not to give up. And I took that to heart. You did. So thank you. They helped out, and that
now I have two, and because of it, I have two good barbers in my ward. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And
appreciate that.
you could tell that's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And for you.
So I look forward to what comes out of the meeting with the city, even with us, to continue, and I know the partnership is going to be a good one. I think the real most significant part of job training that we are often challenged by is that you have those returning citizens who just feel like life is over because they don't get an entree back into second chance. And so I thank you for being a vehicle for second chance in our community. So again, Madam Councilwoman Samples have asked if you have any additional questions, if we can get those to me, and we'll make sure we get those questions answered. If there's not any more questions or any questions that come before the committee, can I get a motion for time?
Motion.
Second.
The motion's been second. We'll take time on this piece of legislation. Thank you again, Mr. Garrett. Our final piece to come before Economic Development Committee is endorsing and authorizing the termination of the revolving loan fund plan certification as required by the U.S. Economic Development Administration in declaring an emergency. I would imagine, Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This loan has been, the city has been using this loan for quite a long time, and now we have come to the end of the loan through the Economic Development Administration with the federal government. Right now, we have a current budget, or what's left in the loan is $50,000. We have one loan out there with Saalfield for $15,800. They are paying monthly on that loan. What we would like to do, because of the little amount that's left in this loan, is basically terminate the loan with the EDA. Saalfield will continue to pay us this money back, and with that money of the $15,000, what we want to do is we're going to put that into our microloan project, which is going into the Great Streets. So that will be able to benefit more businesses, small businesses, as we get this money back. And being, just to let you know, the terminate with convenience, that word convenience means we can apply again to do this revolving loan fund again with the EDA.
Thank you so very much. Is there any questions from the committee? Well, I have just a couple. So the fund was started in 1982?
1983, yes. Correct.
So when's the last date that we actually expense a loan under the revolving loan?
2 years ago.
About 2 years ago?
Yeah, that was the one we did with Saalfield.
Okay, so is the $15,000, is that in addition to the $55,000 that?
No, that's part of that $50,000. So
total, we're looking at about $70,000.
No, it's part of the $50,000, so there's $35,000 that will go back to the EDA. The $15,000 will come to the city as that loan, because we do not have to repay that.
So I'm just getting clarity. On the legislation, it has the amount that to be reallocated after the dissolving of the loan fund was $55,000.
Okay.
Is that $55,000 plus the $15,000, or is that $35,000 or $30,000 plus 15?
$30,000 plus the 15.
$40,000 plus 15.
Yes, correct.
So we don't currently have on hand $55,000, is that what we're saying?
That's correct.
So that's what the legislation say, I'm just
Yes,
saying.
yes.
So maybe that needs to, because what you're now reallocating is what, the 40,000 and not 55,000?
No, reallocating what we will get back from Saalfield is they repay us for the $15,000 that they took out as a loan. The city will receive that over the next 3 years, which is the length of their loan. The remainder of that amount minus $55,000 will go back. The EDA never gave us that money, so really we will never use that money. We will just shut the program down, basically. The EDA gives us the money for the loans as we apply for them.
Before I keep going, so
Good morning, or good afternoon. This will just show you how old I was. I think I was around when this program started. And we've had this money in a fund since 1983. There was some EDA money, some local money, and since 1983 we made, I don't know, probably 50 loans over those years of, different amounts to different people, some of which was paid back, quite a few of which were not paid back. There's just been a little bit of money left, about $50,000 for the last several years. 2 years ago, we lent that $50,000 to Saalfield. They've been paying on time. They pay every month. EDA is very complicated in their paperwork, so when you get so I think their monthly payments are like $400 or under $400. So when you get $400 back, and that is now money that you're supposed to lend out, the EDA wants you to lend out 80% of that. We got $400 in the bank. And since we don't lend it out, they make us put it in an escrow account over at KeyBank, which then gets subtracted fees from every single month, and then every month we get another $400. You're supposed to like blend that 80. It's a complete mess. Okay, so we also have to do tons and tons of hours of paperwork for it. So it's really gotten to the point where what is left and how we're getting it back doesn't make any sense, and we'd like to end our revolving loan with EDA, give them that back, their portion, which is that $35,000, $40,000. And then the remaining amount that's still going to be paid back to us by Sawfield, since we're going to close that account, we'll take that 15 and have them pay back into the micro program. And then as that money comes in, we have more flexibility with that program to, you don't have to lend out $400 if you have $400 in the fund.
So I think it was clear, but I think what's not clear is the legislation. Because the legislation leads me to believe that there's $55,000, and when I dissolve this loan, if this revolving loan fund today, that's going right to the great streets. That's not the case.
That's not the case,
I mean, the confusion may be in the legislation. Here, there's another question for you. You know, even I have done some work with the great streets, kind of going door to door in some of the business districts. And what we find oftentimes is that there are groups, even within the great streets, that cannot participate in some of the offerings because they've been operating as service providers in the community, but they don't own buildings. And so they can't take advantage of facade grants or matching micro grants.
Well, they can take advantage of the micro grants.
So here's a question for you, and maybe Mr. Hardy, you can answer this question. Is it if we decide that this is indeed what we'll do, is to reallocate these funds to the Great Streets program, is it possible to earmark those funds with a little more to kind of get at some of those businesses in the community who can't take advantage of the facade, to do some of the surrounding work, whether it's outdoor lighting or strip lighting or on the sidewalk for safety or what have you. But I think, because I think it can leave a business, at least not an owner, but not owner of the building, who's been contributing to the district for quite some time, feeling a little left out because they can't get access to those resources.
So let me just respond to that real quick. So first, let me correct the record on Great Streets. All the businesses in the Great Street are eligible for a facade grant, even if you don't own your property. What we ask you to do, though, is to get the permission from your property owner to make those facade improvements. We can't give a grant to a business to do, for example, a new sign if the person who owns the building won't allow it. The microloan program is eligible to any business in the Great Street, regardless of whether you own your property or not. And actually, we were really enthusiastic because Copley Road had the most applications for any of the Great Streets in terms of the facade grant program. So we really feel like our first two forays into financing, to Councilwoman Movian's point, to small existing businesses, is making a great deal of headway. But to your point about how we can reallocate those dollars, we hope to do just that, to put it into the microloan program where folks aren't bankable yet, but they have their business plan or they have an existing business and they just need a little bit of assistance, and that's a very flexible program, more flexible even than the facade grant program. But I think it's important for folks to know that everyone in the Great Streets is eligible for a facade grant, but you do have to have permission for your improvement from the building owner if you don't own the building.
So, Mr. Hardy, with all due respect, it's kind of almost like semantics. What I'm saying is the people who are living and working in those communities providing service don't necessarily even have access to their landlord outside of once or twice a year. At least that's been what's told to me. So all I'm asking is, how do we look at ways for those people who are putting their sweat and blood and tears in supporting a business district so that they don't feel outside of when they don't get the permission from their landlords to do facade upgrades? That's all I'm asking.
Yep.
I'm
So
not
that's why
saying
we
that
have
you
the-
unilaterally decided you're going to get a grant, but you're not going to get a grant, you're not going to get a grant. But I'm saying this is what some of the business owners are experiencing.
Sure.
And since we have this free, not free money, but unattached money at the moment, is there some way we can be thinking along those lines to earmark some of those dollars so you can do some upgrades around those businesses?
That is the intention. The intention of the microloan program, of which this would benefit, is to be more flexible than the facade grant program, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. So in the legislation, does the legislation need to change any, do you think? Because reading the legislation, it looks like there's $55,000.
We'll have the law department review it.
Thank
Just to
you.
make sure that we're, that the language is correct, but
Thank you. Is there any other questions from the committee? Any from outside of the committee? Mr. Kilby?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Great Streets Initiative, let me get this straight. It's only for certain areas of the city that you've designated? It's not anywhere?
Mr. Kilby, please
I'll
speak
talk
into
into it, all right.
Thank you.
Question is, the Great Streets Initiative, is that anywhere in the city or just certain designated areas that the city has said these are the areas?
Sure, so it is a designated area. There's one in each ward. There are 10 Great Streets districts, again, one in each ward. The Great Streets Initiative at its base is to change the direction of 10 neighborhood business districts over the course of the next 5 years. Because as a general rule or general practice, as dollars have dwindled, especially federal CDBG dollars, we have spread it like peanut butter across a multitude of things for very little impact. And as a result, a lot of our neighborhoods have struggled because you're not seeing the impact by making concerted resource allocations over a period of time. So the Great Streets program, which we appropriated lovingly from Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., is just that. It's taking these 10 business districts, targeting resources to them, small business, public space, street improvements for 10 years to lift them up in a strategic way.
Okay, sounds like a good idea. When did we designate these areas? Just a year or so ago?
Yeah, so the mayor announced the program at a State of the City, and so we're about a year into the program.
Yeah. Well, it's a good job. You're doing a good job. I'm happy they have the one up in North Hill. But what about Chapel Hill? I mean, they really need some help. I mean, I remember when Macy's closed, I think Sears closed first at Macy's, and then, they do a story in the paper, and the mayor says, I'm going to get together with the mayors of Talmadge and Cuyahoga Falls, come up with a plan. I never heard another thing about it. I mean, so what are you guys doing for Chapel Hill?
So
that's in my ward, by the way.
Sure, understood.
We hadn't noticed.
I think that all of our, just because we picked 10 initial districts does not mean those are the only 10 in the city. We recognize that. But with the resources we have, we really feel like we haven't been making the impact that individuals and people who live in these neighborhoods want to see because the resources are so small and they're scarce, they're spread so thin. So specifically, these initial 10 over the next 5 years, we want to make some real movement. However, hopefully, God willing, we continue to have these resources. We can start designating new Great Streets as others lift up. So we want to eventually get to other aspects of the city. Specific to Chapel Hill, we don't disagree. That's a job hub. It's an area where we are really looking. There already is a critical mass of employment. And so I wish I had good answers in terms of what the future holds for Chapel Hill, but we are working as closely as we can with the mall owner to work out some sort of redevelopment. But I think just to the keeping it germane to the piece of legislation, I think that, we certainly hear your concern about making sure other business districts are not neglected as a result of Great Streets. There are other programs we can use.
Let me get real specific. Up at Chapel Hill, there was a restaurant called the Roadhouse. It closed a couple years ago. And there's a minority woman and man that that lease that area, that space. And they're putting a jazz nightclub in there. They're working on it themselves. And they called me and says, is there anything available? I said, I don't know, I'll check. So, Ms. Ross said, well, not really. There's nothing available. All they wanted was maybe a facade grant or something to put up a sign. And I just think that could be a catalyst to help that area. A jazz nightclub is probably going to attract the right kind of people there. And I just wonder if you guys would look into that. The young lady, her name is Tarana Young, and she's like the fella that she's doing this with, they're working themselves. They're putting their own money up. And I just think we should be trying to help people like that be successful.
We will.
And, I think you guys should look into that.
We will look into it.
Tarona Young's her name, and I'll have her call you, Mr. Hart, okay?
Please do.
Thank you.
I think it's important, just one last thought about Great Streets.
Because they put a bunch of money in themselves already.
Totally understood.
Their own money.
Totally understood. We couldn't be happier with the way the first round of the facade grants went. To have 11 facade grants deployed at one time on Copley Road is going to make a big difference. You're going to be able to see it. You're going to be able to feel it. Before, we doled out facade grants all over the town, and you never really noticed. Somebody might get a sign, somebody might get a new parking lot, but it didn't really lift up a neighborhood. By targeting them, we really feel like over the next 4 years to go, you'll see it. But that does not mean there aren't other things we can do, and I'm happy to follow up with that business owner.
Just as a point of clarity, Ward 4 is not represented on this committee. I just didn't have that conversation with just on Copley Road. So there were other folks, and I think it's still applicable. So again, I'd like us to consider ways that we can support those folks, again, who've been operating in those districts who don't actually own their building, but really still contributing greatly. That's my only question. And so, Mr. Becker, what's your consent okay?
Yes, please. And then we will get you an answer to your questions on the legislation.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably pretty simple. If you look at the legislation, it looks like it's saying one thing, but what I heard was something different. So
we'll get that handled before next week.
So is there any, can I get a motion for consent?
Second.
We have a motion for consent. It's been seconded.
Thank you.
All in favor? Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. So earlier, we didn't have an opportunity to approve the minutes from November 5th. I would just ask for a motion for approval on the Economic Development meeting minutes from November 5th.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We have nothing else to come before the Economic Development Committee. We are now adjourned.
Mr. Keith, we have a presentation for housing.
First, you have budget and finance.
Oh, do we? Okay.
Okay.
Please, I'd like to call to order the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting? Motion and second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. We have before us several items. First item is an ordinance amending ordinance number 82-2018, passed March 19th, 2018, and ordinance number 372-2018, passed October 22nd, 2018, which established the annual appropriation for the current expenses, other expenditures, and the capital outlays of the City of Akron for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2018, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Fricker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So before you is our, what we are classifying as our final 2018 appropriation amendment. We typically do multiple appropriation amendments in a given budget year. We expect that this will be the last one, although we may have a couple supplements. I know we have one grant in the police department that we were made aware of today that they may need some additional funding and is not reflected in these numbers. So we may be supplementing what is before you, with an additional item. So, we are seeking, consent on this piece of legislation. Distributed before you is a memo that goes through the various changes made in each fund and explains the appropriation amendment items. So you can review
So this
those.
coincides with what we have attached to the piece of legislation?
Correct,
the memo.
yes.
Okay, great. All right. We'll take questions in a moment, but I'm probably going to ask if we can have a week to take a look at this. And so at this time, any questions or comments? Yeah, because I want to take a look at, the budget.
Understood. Yeah, we're not,
legislation.
we are not asking for suspension of the rules today, so.
Okay, very good. So I would encourage both committee members and council members in examining both the legislation, the memo that's sent, if you would have any questions, direct those to Ms. Donnell. Okay, very, very good. All right, Ms. Amobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The piece that you just passed to us is related to this particular ordinance?
Correct. There's a memo that goes along with the ordinance itself that explains the various items by fund.
Let me just ask you about Section 12 on this sheet. Is this suggesting that once the CLCs are built, whatever's left, you can just move them to the next project? Is that what this, or what is this?
Okay, so the transfer in the community learning centers is, the CLC tax is dedicated towards the debt service that we pay on the bonds that we issued for the CLC projects. If there's excess tax revenues in a given year, then we transfer that balance over to a reserve fund that we have. And so this is allowing that transfer to happen between the two CLC funds. We have a regular CLC debt service fund, and then we also have a reserve fund. So this allows for the transfer between those two funds.
Okay. May I follow up, sir? So I understand clearly. I know that we are at the very end of the project, and there are some schools, maybe a couple or three or whatever, that's left that the state is not funding. There are no funds left for that. So anything that's left in the reserves could be used toward those schools, even though it's not a commitment from the state, because most of these have been matched by state funding.
But the other piece is there'll be years where we won't have enough new revenue to pay, so the reserves are on hand to help pay for debt service.
Correct. And there's an expectation that we will begin to draw on that reserve. So we were building the reserve all along from 2004 up through when we issued this final series of bonds. So now that we have laddered on all of the bond issuances, we expect that there will be a draw on the reserve for a number of years, assuming that we do get additional growth in the income tax, which we fully expect to do, then sometime out in the future, 8-9 years, we will begin to accumulate some reserve again if, if our income taxes come in with some growth every year.
And we stopped collecting, wasn't it 30 years?
It's 2033.
Yeah, it
is our
expires
last.
in 2033.
Oh, so a year that we won't be around, I guess. So there'll be maintenance this could be used for maintenance of the building and all of that, or anything?
No, it's for equipping and building, that type of thing, but not for regular maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
And the exclamation point is it's going into a reserve that is for the building of schools.
Right, and again, we did plan to spend reserves if necessary.
Correct.
Which is why we're not really spending that money down, because we know someday we may need it to actually pay debt service.
Okay, thank you. Would someone offer up a motion for a week's time? Motion for 1 week's time on this. Have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Okay, thank you. We'll take, and again, please direct any questions to Ms. Donnell you would have in regards to that. Our second item is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a bond of the city in a principal amount not to exceed $34,500,000 for the sale to the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund of the State of Ohio to finance the costs of improvements to the city's wastewater system, pledging certain revenues from the city's wastewater system on a subordinated basis to secure the payment of the principal of and interest on the bond, and authorizing the execution and delivery of the bond, the trust agreement, and other documents, and the taking of other actions related to the issuance and sale of the bond and declaring an emergency. Mr. Fricker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is an additional 45-year bond. We've had several of these over the past 6 months or so. So this is, again, a 45-year bond. We've been able to apply for that longer-term financing and spread those payments out over a longer period of time, which, maximizes the affordability for our ratepayers. This particular project, our engineers have also applied for and received $3 million of the $34 million amount will be interest-free. So that's a nice savings. That should save us about $2.1 million over the course of this 45-year bond. So they were able to apply for and receive that interest-free loan money, which is a huge help to the project. So
45-year bond, that's good. Let me see, 62 plus 45, I'd be 107. Probably won't see this one paid off, so. Yeah. Appreciate your work on that. It's,
don't thank me. I think our engineers are the ones that did all the legwork to get this zero-interest financing. So,
excellent. They might be. Questions or comments? Will be your pleasure.
Consent agenda.
We have a motion for consent. Is there a second? All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have item number 3, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a bond of the city in a principal amount not to exceed $1,500,000 for the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund of the State of Ohio to finance the costs of improvements to the city's wastewater system, pledging certain revenues from the city's wastewater system on a subordinated basis to secure the payment of the principal and of interest on the bond, and authorizing the execution and delivery of the bond, the trust agreement, and other documents, and the taking of other actions related to the issuance and sale of the bond and declaring an emergency. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, 45-year bond. This one is for the Hampton Ridge Sanitary Sewer Project. This one does not have any zero-interest component, but it is a 45-year bond. We expect the interest rates on the first one with that blended rate should be about 2.4%. This one probably about 2.6%.
Okay, very good. Questions, comments? Again, 45 years, and I don't know what the average age is of the Beacon Journal reader, but you want to make sure and let them know that we're spreading this cost out over many, many years, yet to their grandkids, but not all on them. Do we have a consent? Okay. Motion for consent. Is there a second? All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Place that on the consent agenda. Finally, we have an ordinance approving and authorizing the expenditure of $8,500 previously designated for the Akron City Council travel budget for the purchase of one-year subscriptions of the Balancing Act Pro taxpayer receipt and meeting mode software as approved in ordinance number 102018 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll defer to Councilman Neal.
Councilman Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a piece of legislation all of us are familiar with. We passed the original piece back in spring, and that was to put the city's budget online. We had the 30-day free trial. The thing that was holding up the 30-day free trial, of course, was a funding source. Brought in multiple different funding sources that have not fully been exhausted, that those dollars are going to go back to the general fund. And working with Mr. Fricker, he helped me take a look at other funding sources, and we identified one as our travel. Our original budget for travel was $40,000. It was adjusted to 34. I don't have a reason why we adjusted it to 34. But to date, we've expensed about 17 almost.
Correct, about 17, but as we talked about, there are some in-process payments from travels that happened over the summer, about $6,000,
about
correct?
$6,000. So it leaves right in the neighborhood of about $11,000 left over in our travel budget. So I've identified the $8,500 there to be able to pay for the Balancing Act software so that, again, council can have a tool for us to, one, better understand the budget, and then two, so that we can engage our citizens in the work of having an understanding of the city's budget and letting us know what their priorities are. Just to give members of council an idea, we've talked about, I've brought before us at one time the My Neighborhood Our Akron dollars, and I think we all are well aware now because we asked on some legislation that came earlier, when we don't fully expense those dollars, they go back to the general fund. To give you an idea on the My Neighborhood Our Akron, over the course of that fund, which started back in 2015, we've sent back a little close to about $250,000 that went back to the general fund. I mention that because as council, if we had a better understanding of our budget, just like the question was asked about the dollars for the indigent fund, most of us would love to have projects where we can support organizations in our neighborhood over and above My Neighborhood Our Akron City Council grant. That's $250,000 that's available, would have been available, if we had an understanding of that. Now, in regards to our City Council travel budget, over the years, and this goes back to, thank you, Mr. Fricker, this goes back to, I don't know how many of us were around in '97 to now. Over the course of that budget, we've given back about $50,000. So, have identified a funding source that will cover the $8,500 that we now know is the exact cost of the software. When the original request came in, it was at $10,000 because it didn't know what the exact cost would be. We know that the cost has not increased. It's $8,500. We don't have a problem with the information being uploaded because we have the assistance of the company itself helping us, as well as citizens that have volunteered. So with that, the piece that we passed back in the spring, we now have a funding source, as well as the question on how it's going to be uploaded. The only thing left for us now is to act on the 30-day free trial so that we can have this in place to assist us during the actual budget hearing process. So with that, Mr. Chairman,
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Fusco.
Yes, thank you.
I don't think your mic's on.
It's on now. Thank you. With all respect to the sponsor, I would request that we take a week's time on this. The person who is primarily responsible for the council budget is the president of council, and the president will be returning next week. And I think that we should have Margot Somerville here and have her weigh in. And, you know, I respect for her, you know, I would respectfully request at least 1 week's time.
Questions or comments? Mr. Neal?
No, I was just going to say I agree with Mr. Fusco, but in my discussion with Mr. Fricker, and I'll leave that until our president's here, I think we have to understand that that is City Council's budget, and I'll share some information. Matter of fact, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, if I could share it now.
In regards to this?
Yeah, in regards to the budget. Well, you know what, that's okay, I'll do it later.
Stay on this piece of legislation for now.
Well, it is on this piece, but I think the piece I want to know is that it's important for us to have an understanding of the budget. So I do believe it is best that the president be here. But again, for council to understand, it's council's budget. And so, you know, everybody has one vote. She does oversee the administration of it. But how dollars are allocated need to be voted on by council. So with that, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So, have a motion to refer this? Have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, that concludes our legislation, and we will adjourn at 3:52. Thank you.
Housing Committee is going to meet in 1 minute. We got a guest speaker, no legislation. I would request that council members stick around for it because it's an important discussion.
Say no. Okay.
What do we have on? Who do we have on housing?
I'm sorry?
Okay, Kamer, yeah, he's here. Swartzky's here somewhere. Yeah, he's here.
So there's no legislation, is there? That's what I thought.
Budget. Let me say hi, Liz.
Yes, yeah, you want. Don't make that offer. I could understand why.
Yeah, well, Tara, yeah, I know.
I'm on chair one, never me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hey, can you stick around for a minute? It's not going to take long, Doug. All right, Housing Committee, call to order. We have a quorum. All 5 members are here. I'm Bruce Kilby. I'm the chairman of the Housing Committee. We have a guest speaker, a young man named Zach Cole, who Councilwoman Tara Samples, made contact and invited him to this committee meeting. I guess he's got something called the well, okay, like the well, okay, and he's got something called the Middlebury Plan, and supposedly he has a $300,000 grant from the Knight Foundation, is that correct, to do some housing rehab. So at that, Mr. Cole, I'll turn it over to you.
I'm Zach. Executive Director.
Mr. Cole?
I am.
Sorry.
That's all right. I'm Executive Director of the Well Community Development Corporation. And if you don't mind, for like 2 minutes before we really dive into housing, just to kind of give a snapshot of who the Well is and the work that we're doing. This is Curtis Minter Jr., our Director of Operations, and Kelly McHood, our Development Director. Just give it to them for a minute to just give an overview of who the Well is and the work that we're doing in the Middlebury neighborhood.
First off, let me say thank you to Councilwoman Tara Mosley Sampe for the opportunity to speak before you all here today. We have had the opportunity to engage with the City of Akron in a number of different ways. I myself on the City Commission and the Mayor's Citizens Institute. So we are very grateful that we will be given the honor to speak here today. Fairly quickly, I am going to overview the last couple of years of the Well Community Development Corporation. We were founded in fall of 2016, where we were fortunate enough to acquire a property along East Market, a 100-year-old church building that was First Presbyterian. We were successfully able to repurpose that church over the course of 6 months. It is now Akron Beacon's best coffee shop. We now have a ton of ton of special events, including eBay Retail Revival, amongst other things, in our meeting hall and cafe space. And then we successfully leased 100% of our 10,000 square feet of classroom space to budding nonprofits and small businesses. Our most notable venture as of late, we've been able to secure nearly $300,000 for Akron's first shared use kitchen and incubator, tentatively called Akron Food Works, where food entrepreneurs in the city of Akron will have access to a commercial kitchen and will be able to do a variety of things, including baking, commissary and need for food trucks, small catering operations, hobbyists, farmers market vendors, and assortment of others. My colleague, Shelley, will continue.
So one of our initiatives is supporting place, and we've done that in a number of ways in the community. We really want to provide spaces and opportunities for people to relationally connect with one another, and also with the resources that we have at the Well, specifically in regards to housing and economic development. Our first project that we did last spring was the Middlebury Block Challenge, where we asked neighbors to come together to create a project that they wanted to see come to life on their block. A couple of community gardens were born out of that. We turned at the building where we own, there was a kind of a vacant space in the back, so we activated that space, built a pergola, a hoop house, a community garden, and then we connected with Asia Inc., and they held their farmers market all throughout the summer. So we were able to increase access to healthy and fresh food in the community. We are currently and almost finished with a neighborhood plan. MKSK, who did the redevelopment plan downtown, they came to Middlebury and are giving us strategic recommendations on how we can move forward as a community. We're actually presenting that, or MKSK is presenting that tomorrow at the Neighborhood Network at 6 p.m. We adopted a program called Akron Hope, and that program really supports school students, Akron Public Schools, including our local school, which is Mason CLC. They have individualized mentoring, and we saw Akron Hope as a way to connect Mason CLC with the opportunities at the Well, specifically in regards to housing. We have an AmeriCorps Vista, which is building a community tool library, so that will help support our housing initiative as well. Folks can come in for a small membership fee, rent tools, have home maintenance classes, and so they can learn how to use the tools on their home, and so they don't have to spend a lot of money for repairs. And then lastly, we have a partnership with Links Family and Community Services. They're a nonprofit in the Middlebury area. I've been around there for about 10 years. I've done great work. And when we get people into our houses through healthy rental opportunities, they will come in and support them in other ways. So whether it's job placement, family planning, a variety of wraparound services for the members. And with that, I'll pass it to Zach.
And so obviously why we're talking today is housing. So one of the biggest pieces of why the Well Community Development Corporation exists is because we saw a huge hole in housing in our community. So the Middlebury community has 2,700 homes. 25% of them are owner occupied, which means 75% of the homes in Middlebury are owned by people who do not live in the Middlebury community. So we started to ask the question of what's the best way to reverse that statistic? How do we get to a place where Middlebury would one day have 75% home ownership? But the reality of that statistic is that it's not as simple as, well, here's a house that you can buy, right? There's a lot that goes into building a community's capacity to support individuals as they move towards home ownership. And so the Well, a year ago, announced that we wanted to launch we launched a 60 for 60 campaign, where we wanted to rehab 60 homes in the next 60 months. So a house a month for the next 5 years. And obviously, the biggest portion of that, or the biggest hurdle in that is funding for houses. Especially in the Middlebury community, where I myself put $60,000 into a home and bought it for $4,000, put $60,000 into it, and it appraised for $36,000. And then, so we said, okay, well, where do we start, right? How do we begin to even think about financing this project? And Huntington, the bank, has pretty much said, well, pre-rehab, we can finance about 1/3 of the property. So if you take a house, even if you put $50,000 into a house and it appraises for $36,000, all we can borrow on the front side is about $16,000 of that house. Well, if I buy a house for $10,000 and only have another $6,000 to put into it, I'm not doing any long-term good for the property. I'm doing minor cosmetic things that are going to last about a year. So what the well wants to do is say, how do we purchase and rehab properties at the price point of about $50,000? So we're not sinking a huge amount over the appraised value, but we're still putting in the resources that are needed to make the house safe, sound, sanitary, and quality. So all of that, right, we're marching this direction. We have completed 13 units in 2019, and that does not include the 8 that we completed prior to the incorporation of the well. So the well and its employees have been a part of rehabbing 14 homes in the neighborhood, 7 single-bedroom apartments, a church building, 3 commercial storefronts that we just acquired in October that we're in the midst of rehabbing. The reality that Middlebury sits in front of is the one page that you have in front of you. So one of the reasons why I think Middlebury has a unique opportunity that may or may not be true in a lot of the other communities that we have is you drive down Market Street from Summa Hospital down to the East End development, you see construction fences all over the place. Whether it's new buildings being demoed and actually plans to be rebuilt, a new LIHTC project by East Akron Neighborhood Development Corporation going in, the East End development itself, the new fire station, Summa Hospital's new wing. I put $300 million on that page, but it's probably closer to $600, $700, $800 million being invested into Middlebury. So the question then becomes, we have $700 million of investment, and then we have the current state of our housing market, where we have decreased housing values, we have slum landlord culture, we have 75% of the equity that could be realized in our community being realized in communities that are not Middlebury. So what do we do to create a context where we might actually experience shared prosperity in our community in a context where we have lots of outside development coming into the community? And if you create a context where the poor or the lower income in our community are cared for, I think you ultimately create a context where all people can thrive. So for us, that starts with how do we create a housing market that makes sense for all people? And that's getting to a place where we can see not only the 13 rental properties that we've already seen, but an additional 20 rental properties. And if you see those 20 rental properties at $50,000 a house, we're looking at $1 million pool that would ultimately bring us to a place where we're investing in 20 homes. The ask on that page is $1.4 million because it would cover our operating expenses and also have funding going to a small nonprofit in our community called Links Communities and Support Services, where they would actually be providing wraparound services once a family moves into the home. So there have been lots of programs and lots of things created to get someone into a house, and where we want to support is the long term of keeping them in the house. So Links Support Services will actually have an initial assessment with a renter, and then we'll walk with that family for at least 1 year, and they've been so successful in their programs in the past that they actually have people opt into a second year as they continue to move. So what we want to do is create a context in Middlebury where we experience shared prosperity, and we think that starts with the rental properties and putting a little bit of needed pressure on the slum landlords to invest in their properties and create a context where they actually care about the space that they live in. Because if we can put $50,000 into a house, charge $650 a month, which is needed in the community, then the person who buys a house for $10,000 and it's falling apart can no longer charge $800 a month for their property. So the proposal that we've put in front of you, we've gotten positive support from the Knight Foundation. So nothing is in writing, but the number that you see there is $386,000 from the Knight Foundation, and they have verbally agreed to support us at that much. Earlier last week, we had a meeting with James Hardy and Jason Segedy, who were excited about the project. We've had several conversations with Tara, Councilwoman Samples, sorry, about this whole conversation. So with that, if you guys don't have anything to add, if you guys have questions or thoughts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cole and the other panel. You guys are doing some really important work in an area of the city that I think over the years has been somewhat overlooked. We had, what was it, the UPA or something like that? They kind of went defunct. I think that was a kind of a disaster. So you're kind of filling a void, I guess, that they left behind.
Yeah.
And my feeling is home ownership is really important, but housing, quality of the housing, even if it's rental property, is also very important. So this is a first step. And I wish we could come up with some ordinances that we could make these slum landlords, as you call them, do a little more than the bare minimum and get the property value up in this part of town, which is, there's a lot of investment going on. The things you mentioned, over by Goodyear, East Market Street, down by Case Avenue, and, well, up the road where, I guess that's Bank Street and East Market Street. They're putting where Sokol's Furniture used to be, if you all remember that. What's that called? What's that project called? Yeah, my ward is, I live in Goodyear Heights, but most of my ward is North Hill. But I really consider myself kind of like an East Sider, because I went to the University of Akron, always lived around the university, moved, you know, one of my first apartments was on Hazel Street.
Oh, cool.
And moved up to Goodyear Heights eventually, and lived in the same house for 20 years, but been in 3 different wards because of gerrymandering. So anyways, but that goes on at all levels of governments. But anyways, that's not what we're talking about. But I really think you're doing some good work. You sound like you know what you're doing. Could you tell us a little bit of your background, Mr. Cole, where you got to be knowledgeable in this area?
Yeah, so I bought and rehabbed my home in 2012. And from there, I put about every dime that I had into other homes on our block. And so we were able to rehab 8 homes on the first block of Jewett Street.
Block is Jewett? Okay, right off
So-
of Upson. I know where it is.
So yeah, we're kind of closer to Buchtel than the Hazel side, but we've rehabbed 8 homes in the neighborhood, and just I think the thing that first set me off on kind of this direction was looking for my house. So I grew up knowing, having a lot of relationships with kids in the neighborhood, just through different programs. But I had cash ready to buy a house and would walk into houses that people were living in or not living in without heat, without running water, and just saw huge injustices that I wasn't aware of prior to. And I think, so the well kind of started, I think 7 years ago, even though we incorporated about 2.5 years ago.
So you got started basically as an investor and a home buyer yourself, which is good. So you have a perspective rather than just, you know, doing public things in the private sector, which is, I think, really important. But one thing, this old, some people call it the Cotter House, I think it's called the Robinson Mansion right there at Cotter and would be Buchtel. That's been on the market for about 10 years. I mean, that would be really great if somebody could buy that and rehab that. I heard it takes about $1 million to fix that place up, but...
or more.
Yeah, you know anything about that? I know. We're going to get to it. Okay, Linda, you have, Linda Mobian, go ahead. Councilwoman Amobian, go ahead.
I appreciate you taking me first, and thank you for doing that, Mr. Chair. I just got a quick question, and I really love what you're doing and the concept. I think this is more driven by ministry based on what I hear you doing. Let me ask you this. I realize that even with the investment, it doesn't bring the property beyond or even at the appraised value or whatever. Is this project eligible for the tax abatement program at all through the city?
From what we understand, we are eligible to apply.
Okay.
And even as a nonprofit, we need to apply because it would maintain that for the next owner if we didn't own it for 15.
And I hate the thought of doing things for slum lords, but you do have citizens of Akron living in those facilities, and that's where my heart would be. So that's your intent is to apply for the tax abatement?
We would apply for the tax abatement for our properties, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for the work you're doing. It's great work, and I love the ministry part because you're talking about citizens that are living in substandard places before you found out about them. So I appreciate that. Thank you much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you. Just an observation, and I want to thank Mr. Cole. You live in Ward 10, best ward in the city. And thank you for fixing up Jewett and what you're doing there. When I was down at the State House, what I've seen was, this was about 5-6 years ago, what was happening down in Columbus with the young millennials. You know, where we're at, right next to that great hospital, city hospital, if we can get those who work there, the nurses, maybe the doctors, build up that neighborhood. You know, they work different hours than most people. It'd be so great for them to be so close to the hospital. And I've seen that down in Columbus. Some of the hospitals in downtown Columbus, people are getting sick and tired of driving home and taking like 2-3 hours just to get to the suburbs. Why they have to go back to work. I think there's great potential there. There's great housing stock there, and I just applaud you for all the hard work you're doing, and you guys are making it cool. When we go down to the well, I see young people, I see professionals, I see students, I see workers, so it's a great thing that you did, and thank you for saving that beautiful church there.
Any other committee members? Mr. Swartzky?
Really respect your commitment. When I heard that you actually live where you're trying to make an impact in the neighborhood, that's kind of the first step of showing leadership, all-out commitment. I also have grown kind of watching you guys from a distance. Really respect your competency, what you've been able to accomplish. Because sometimes people are idealistic, and they're even a little crazy. They'll go move where they're actually trying to fix it, but they can't get it done. And it does appear you guys are getting it done. You guys are collaborating well. I guess a question would be, what could the city do more to help you? Are there some specific steps? Have you thought about this? You probably are groaning at times and saying, oh, if only I had this or only had that. How could we help you guys?
I can speak into that. So the bones of Middlebury are very, very good. But in the future, I think it's up for discussion to talk about zoning so that we can encourage mixed-use development. We need duplexes, we need apartment buildings, et cetera, so that we can follow the lead of Highland Square, where we can bring folks into the Middlebury neighborhood and have opportunity for people across socioeconomic status. So, go ahead.
What would you think about, like we did in West Hill, allowing businesses in homes? How do you feel about that kind of? So
that's a start, yes, sir.
Enterprise. Is that what you mean?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Part of our planning process with MKSK tomorrow, there will be a loose form-based code suggestions that at some point we would bring before whoever it makes sense to bring before, and ask for a form-based code revision in the Middlebury community.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds really good. By the way, it's not at Highland Square, the mixed West Hill.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, just so.
I think Mr. Kamer wanted to say something. Did you have your hand up? No, I'm sorry. Okay, Councilwoman Samples.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was about to say, Mr. Cole, Mr. Mentor, how do you plan to offset? Of course, I've met with you guys several times about this, and you all have adopted me as well, even though you do live in Ward 10. The well is in Ward 5.
Our building's in Ward 5.
Yeah, that's right, just so you know. How do you offset what you propose to do with the 60 for 60, which is phenomenal, with that word gentrification?
Yep.
Because, you know, for me, as I've traveled across the country, just in my capacity, you know, I tell people all the time, once you see the joggers or the people walking with the poodles, it's too late. How do you guys plan on offsetting that with what you plan on doing here?
I'd like to speak into that, Councilwoman. So the beauty of 60 for 60, we have flexibility as a nonprofit developer, and the angst of collaboration with Links Community and Family Services, that we're already considering end users for the properties. So we understand the felt need of Middlebury is healthy rental opportunities right now, but it very well could be 5 to 10 years, say, healthy pathways to home ownership. So those same properties we might acquire today could very well be pipelines for low to moderate income families to purchase a home in the future. So in short, I think that would be the appropriate response.
Okay, thank you. Any other council members? Councilwoman Sims?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just want to say thank you, and I'm always very moved by terminology of shared prosperity, because sometimes we start at the top and forget about the folks on the bottom. You know, I've always embraced the philosophy that as a people, we're really only as well as the sickest one among us. And so that concept, that's really interwoven, and I know what it is because I've been with you probably since about 2012 when you bought that house. Yep. And everybody that you employ that has at the core of who they are, community first. And so I just want to say that and how much I really appreciate that. I do think that addressing some of the zoning issues will go a long way to building the kind of community that you're looking at. And I don't think that West Akron's zoning changes wouldn't be a bad idea to even consider over there. You know, I've had 2 tours, I think, walks through the community with you all, and know the desires of the residents. And so it's not like outsiders coming in and saying this is what you're going to have. This is really being born out of a community of folks who are invested there, heart, soul, and mind. So I commend that, and I don't think that's going to change, because I personally, since 2012, had not seen you shift left or right 1 iota in terms of your commitment. So I know this is genuine and true. My sister in the middle, I've kind of got to hang out with her for a few years, just heart for the community, and I raised that one on the end, but he won't tell the truth about it. But so, you know, you have good folks with you, your heart is in the right place. I think you're thinking right in terms of planning, and you put people, literally put people first. So I thank you for that. And I look forward to, as a representative of the city, in any way that we might be able to support the work that's happening over in Middlebury, and any other, really, CDCs throughout the city who have this kind of philosophical core about how neighborhoods should grow, work, and how they should exist. So I commend you all, and thank you very much for your commitment.
Is there any other council members? Councilman Schwartzky?
Just one final comment that kind of sums up how I feel, which is when I look at you guys, I just feel good about Akron.
Yeah, I do too. Anyways, anyone else? Okay, I just want to say I wasn't even aware of this until Councilwoman Samples brought it to my attention last week. I'm going to go down to the well, check it out, but it seems like sometimes when it comes to these kind of things, you get involved with government money, community development money, and there's all these strings attached, and it prevents you from doing some creative things. And I think with money being tight, we need to try to do creative things that can accomplish some of the goals we want: home ownership, job training. I mean, we can think of all kinds of creative things, but there's always some impediment. We can't do that because they don't let us do that when we take federal money for CD. So it sounds like you're going to be a little more flexible, but I'd like to sit down and talk to you about some things. But I want to thank you all for coming down. If you've got anything else to say it. Otherwise,
I think to the point earlier about gentrification, I think that's the importance and the urgency of now, right? With hundreds of millions of dollars coming into Middlebury, if we don't act now, I think we wake up 10 years from now and say, man, in 2018, if we had done something different, then maybe we wouldn't have seen gentrification. And that's where I think we have an opportunity to be a community on the front side of investment, be able to make the right investments, to really put us in a position that values the people who are currently in the community. So,
Yes, this is a audacious housing project before us, but given the flexibility as a nonprofit developer, we may be able to pioneer something for other neighborhoods to follow. I was born and raised here in the city of Akron, but grew up on the most part on the west side. My father is a proud east sider. It's okay. So considering those neighborhoods also with this housing project is heavily on our mind. It's something we take a great deal of pride in. We are all Akronites to the very core. So as best we can be an asset to the city is our hope.
well, let me say, Middlebury, it may not have the quality of housing in general as some other parts of the city, but if you look at some of those old houses on North Arlington Street, that was a fine old neighborhood at one time. You could see those weren't poor people living there. They weren't, some of those houses have been torn down, which is a shame. It's too bad we couldn't have saved more of them. And actually, if you want to know the history of Akron, the east side's much older than the west side. Before there was a west side, east side was Akron. And Middlebury, there was a Middlebury before there was an Akron. You all know that.
Indeed.
So it sounds like we're on the path to reviving the oldest part of Akron, which is really good. And I want to thank you all for coming down here. And we'll see how this goes. Maybe somewhere down the line, who knows when, maybe the city will come up with some money to help you guys out. Who knows? But
Fantastic.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.